Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Iowa Prison Perspectives. Once again, I'm Sue Hutchins, and I do the interviews on this particular channel for the purpose of informing you, the public, about what prison is like for the people who are incarcerated, for their family members, for what it's like to work in the prisons and the conditions and the opportunities that people have when they work in prison. And also, I interview advocates such as myself who would like to see some reform for the positive. This particular channel is a collaboration between Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, the Iowa Justice Action Network, and Iowa Cure. And once again, it is for you, the public, to be informed about what prison is like and the effects of prison on people in our community. I would love to hear from you. This is really for you, and I would like your feedback. So please feel free to contact me at Iowa Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. That's IA Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. Whether you agree with what I'm doing, whether you disagree with what I'm doing, if you have someone that you think ought to be interviewed, or if you yourself feel like you ought to be interviewed, please feel free to contact me. I look forward to hearing from everybody and getting the feedback on this particular channel. Today, we're fortunate to have time to hear from a loved one. This is a friend of mine. Her name is Nancy. Her husband was incarcerated, and she has agreed graciously to share her story of what prison was like for her and the effects of prison on her family. So I will turn it over to Nancy. It's all yours.
Hi there, Sue. It's good to see you, and I'm glad to be here and share my story in hopes that it helps others. Um, I truly believe that the adversity in my life has uh, led to so much growth personally and then again professionally. Um, our story starts out, you know, 2011. Um, my husband and I were living in a small town that we grew up in. Our We had our three kids. Our boys were in elementary school. My daughter was a toddler at the time, and got a surprise visit from Homeland Security. And I don't want to get too much into that because I could talk the whole time about the raid on our house. Um, but I just want to stick with how destructive that tactic of invading someone's home and making their home feel very insecure and without any warning, uh, when things could have been handled differently. They could have knocked on the door politely and came in, but I know there's two sides to every story. They don't know what we're like. Even though if they'd have asked around, they could have found out that we weren't violent people, or we were just living our lives, well respected in the community for the most part. Uh, we adopted all of our kids, so we had to go through strenuous feats to bring them home.
A lot of scrutiny.
Yeah, a lot of scrutiny, a lot of invasive questions, and all kinds of things that we went through to get our kids. So it was a total shock when they came to our house. Um, they left that day with our electronics and came back 6 months later with an arrest warrant for my husband. He was charged with possession of what was then called child pornography. Now we call it child sex abuse images. He had they found 13 images on one hard drive of our computer, and he was charged with just that. Um, at the time, my mental health was not well. I was stressed out about a lot of things and then added this on top of it. We had already lost a lot of our loved ones to cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My husband's parents both died of cancer. 2008, my dad and my sister both died of cancer. We'd been struggling with infertility in our marriage. That was really hard on both of us. Um, a lot of family drama that comes with unhealthy coping mechanisms and things. So, um, this on top of all that was just too much for me.
Yes.
I didn't handle it. I handled it the best I could
Hmm.
with the tools that I had.
Yes.
Um, I got in to see a therapist right away, and my family doctor after the raid, and so I got on some medication to help me manage to get me some sleep, and uh, yeah,
To
it was
cope,
pretty bad. Part
just to be able to cope
Yeah,
and get
just to
through
be
the
able to
day.
cope. Um, and then the therapist did us some really great favors by setting up family team meetings for us to prepare for when my husband went to prison. Um, we were always very transparent with our community, which was a lot of our church, was
Hmm.
our community, was our family even at the time. And we were very transparent with what was going on. Um, my husband had a porn addiction that he didn't know how to deal with, and he was too embarrassed to ask for help.
Hmm.
He was actually relieved when they came and took away our things because he wanted to stop, but there was no mechanism for him to reach out for help that he could see. Um, so he had to face the consequences of his actions, and he was always very gracious about that. He knew he did
Yeah.
wrong, and he had to pay the price. Um, After he was arrested, they let him out on pretrial release. And mind you, this is in the federal system, so it's a different level than state. And
Yes.
we were in the Southern District of Iowa. Um, a lot of the judges that we dealt with or have been retired. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, but we were fortunate that he drew a very fair judge for his sentencing. And I'm an advocate. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had been helping run our janitorial business that we started on our own. Um, we were 20 years married then, and 20 years in business. So um, I got I advocated for our family.
Yes.
I advocated for the best results we could get out of this whole mess. I asked people to write character letters for him. I asked people to come to his sentencing and hear for themselves that he was not involved in hands-on crimes. He was not, this is a crime that anybody who has a porn addiction could easily fall into. So we had 30 people come to our sentencing hearing.
Hmm.
We had 30 people write letters to the judge,
Yeah.
and he took all of those things into consideration and gave him, ironically, a 30-month sentence. Most people with that charge at that time were getting a 48-month sentence.
Hmm.
So after he appeared for his sentencing hearing or change of plea and pled guilty and accepted to take his sentence from the judge, he was then incarcerated at Polk County Jail under contract from the federal government. Um, I was a mess,
Understandable.
and I wasn't given anything from the system to cope. My myself and my kids were secondary victims of his crime
Sure.
as it affected us, but nobody gave us the tools. I didn't get any financial help. My
Right.
husband was the breadwinner. Excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
I gotta turn my fan. My husband was the breadwinner, and suddenly I had to go into the mode of parenting three kids by myself, going to all of their events. They were little, they were active. Then I had to manage our business. We were very fortunate to have good friends and good quality help at the time, um, to where I didn't have to do that. We met, somebody introduced us to a gentleman who was happened to be in the janitorial business, but had also happened to have spent some time incarcerated in the federal system. And wonderful people, him and his wife were good mentors to us, um, gave us some idea of what to expect. Um, and also, there was another gal I happened to meet along the way who had gone through this same exact scenario a year ahead of us. So
Mm-hmm.
she could also give us advice on, call the federal public defender.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea there was such a thing. And she was able to set us up with that office before he was actually arrested. So we had a connection there. And I truly feel like the federal public defender does the best they can do in those situations. Um, but because of evidence, they've
Sure.
got hard evidence, so you're not going to get out of it. It's not going to go away, the crime. Um, but it was a lot to manage and a lot of shock and awe, not to mention the stigma
Yes.
of growing up in the same town that I was living in.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows where we live. Everybody knew that there was a raid on our house. They
Mm-hmm.
were talking about it at the bank. They were talking about it at all the convenience stores. I
Sure.
found out 6 months later they were talking about it at the auto parts store.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
everybody's speculating on what's happening at our house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and me having my own mental health diagnoses, I couldn't just let that roll off. I felt like I had to control the whole situation, and that put a lot of pressure on me as well.
Sure. Sure. When
But
when you when you look back, if I could interrupt you for just 1 second.
yes, please
When you
ask
look
questions.
Okay. When you look back on your life prior to the arrest, from the eyes that you have now, were there any signs that your husband was in trouble?
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Did you recognize them at the time?
no,
Okay.
I didn't even know that he could get in legal trouble for looking at porn online. I'd never looked at porn online.
Mhm.
I knew he was doing it. He was denying a lot, like how much he was doing it.
Mhm.
He would say that he was doing other things. Um,
Did you assume it was adult porn?
yeah, because I didn't know there was
Right.
anything else. I
Okay.
didn't realize that there was
Such a thing.
anything illegal going. I thought, well, if it's illegal, why don't they take it off the internet?
Mhm.
That was how
Very innocent and
innocent
naive you were.
and,
Yeah.
just naive about how the internet worked at the time.
Mhm.
I'm 55 years old this year. In 2 weeks I'll be 55, double nickels.
Well,
And
congratulations.
yeah, so our generation, we didn't grow up with computers in our house. I didn't get a computer until I was 23 years old. We didn't have smartphones back then. I had no idea that there was illegal things on the internet that would get you thrown in
Put
jail.
in prison. Yeah.
After they raided our house, I was like, really? They can? I
They can do that?
just
Yeah.
didn't know. I thought, well, why is it on the internet if it's illegal? Um,
Yeah.
and I didn't understand the impact back then either of the crime of possessing and viewing, trading child sex abuse images. I didn't understand that how much harm that caused.
Mm-hmm.
uh, I went through a lot of time just thinking, well, it's just pictures, he's not hurting anyone. I made up a lot of excuses and minimized a lot too. But I also think that the system sometimes maximizes things as well.
Mm-hmm. So
I
it's
think,
both sides. It happens
yeah,
both ways, is what it sounds like you're saying. You
that's my
minimize,
first,
and they,
yeah,
yeah, that's the
that's
way
my
it's.
personal opinion because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like his pornography use was out of his control. Um, he later said, I would tell myself, I want to quit. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then later feel compelled to do it again. Look at, and he says mostly he was looking at legal pornography, adult women. Um, I have no way of proving that other than the low amount of images that they found on our computer. That to me, that's always a factor. They never said how many legal images they found compared to the illegal images.
Right. They only were interested in the illegal.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So I've never thought that he had a problem with child pornography. It was just, I had a good friend at the time um, who was a recovering opioid addict. And I was asking her, how could he do that? What what would possess him, And she said, well, when you're under the influence of something, your inhibitions go down
Mhm.
no matter what drug it is. And I really feel like pornography is a drug.
Mhm.
um she
It
said,
has that you feel like it has the same effects on the brain as a drug.
yes, and
Okay.
there are studies that
Right.
show that.
Okay.
I
That's funny
know
to hear
there's
about
way
that.
all kinds of different schools of thought on it, but I know there's studies that show that.
Yes.
um that your um tolerance increases. So
Mhm.
you need stronger and stronger, more diverse images to complete the high that you're going for. Just like drinking alcohol, you need more and more alcohol to get you to the level of drunkenness that you desire. Um, so there's no doubt that he had an addiction
Mhm.
and an issue with it. But that's not the guy that I knew. And that's what I told him when he got caught. Is like, that's not who you are. Um, I've known him since I was 14 and he was 18. And he never took advantage of me. He was not like that.
Mhm.
He didn't seek out ways to be around children like people with certified pedophilic disorder does,
Mhm.
working in a school, working in a daycare. He would never. I used to sign us up to work in the church nursery, and he would find an excuse to get out of it. He jokes and says, well, I can barely stand my own kids. I don't want to be around anyone else's.
Mhm.
So, um, I don't know. I just staying with him was never questioned to me because
Mhm.
we've been friends for so long. We've been together for so long. And he really did change through the whole thing. He made some really positive improvements on himself, and that's been the good thing to come out of one of the good things to come out of it.
One of the good things. What was it like for your children?
Um, Confusing, you
How
know.
old were they?
My boys were like 8 and 9 when the raid happened, and my daughter was a year and a half old. So, she watched me break down during the raid. I don't think it, I don't know if it had any effect on her. She wasn't crying, she wasn't traumatized by the whole thing, but I don't, it's hard to gauge
Sure.
what it was like for her. Um, the boys, life after the police left that day, life went on. I had to take them to soccer practice. Well, I had to pick them up from school.
Mm-hmm.
And even on my way to get them, one of my friends was leaving the school and pulled up next to me and said, "Hey, I saw all the vehicles at your house earlier. Is everything okay?" And I had no idea what to say to her. Um, but then I had to go to soccer practice, and I had to put on a fake face and just pretend like everything was okay. I would break down crying, and the boys would be like, "Mom, why are you crying?" And I'd have to make up something dumb to tell them. For 6 months, our dishwasher didn't work right, and that's why I was sad. Because I couldn't think of anything less traumatizing. But after he was arrested, they sent him home with an ankle monitor, and you can't hide those.
Right. Right.
So we had to tell them that your dad is in trouble because he broke the rules of the internet. And so now he's going to have consequences for that. And one of them is he has to wear this ankle monitor, and he has to be home at a certain time. And oh, by the way, you're not allowed to have friends over anymore. That was one of the things that rocked our world. Is kids were always
At
safe
your
at our
house.
house. We had friends over all the time. We had the neighbor kids over all the time. And now my kids have to go somewhere else to play. Um, even if my husband wasn't at home, they still weren't allowed to have friends over.
Yes.
Um, and that was until he went to jail. Um, that's
And what was that? What was him being in prison? I'm assuming he was in prison. Well, I know he was in prison. So what
Yeah.
was that like? What were the effects of prison on your children and you?
Okay. Um, so at his sentencing, we asked for him to be placed close to home, and because he had such a short stay, and he would have qualified to go to a camp if how the points are figured, he was such a
Hmm.
low risk. He didn't have any criminal background. Uh, he could have gone to a camp, but at that time they weren't sending sex offenders to camps. So they sent him to the classification center in Leavenworth from Polk County Jail because he was in Polk County Jail for 7 months. And we would go see him there through the video monitoring system
Hmm.
back before you could do it from home. Uh,
Yeah.
and I would take them to the jail to see to see him. It
Hmm.
was weird. It was weird, but I felt it was important for them to keep that connection with their dad.
Hmm.
Um, they missed him,
Of
of
course.
course, and then when he got transferred to Leavenworth CCA, they said, "Well, we're just going to keep you right here in Leavenworth because you don't have very much time." So he went to Leavenworth USP, which is supposed to be It used to be a Max,
Right.
and
Used to be a horrible place.
yeah,
At one time,
it's
it was absolutely
still not.
horrible.
It wasn't
Well, I
that
know, but I mean, it used to be worse. Yeah, I mean, well,
bad.
yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it's old and decrepit and outdated, and there are rats
Mhm.
and bugs and all the things that you find in those old places. So he was sent there, which they called it a medium facility. There were no other people there with sex crimes, allegedly. He was called out immediately for his papers by the shot caller from Iowa.
Sure.
He called his first call home to me was, "You have to fake papers for me because I'm telling him I'm in here for tax evasion. And if they find out, I'm either going to have to go to the hole or I'm going to get beat up or killed." And I was like, oh, that's a lot of pressure.
Hmm.
And I don't know how to, I had
I
no
don't know
idea
how to
how
fake
to
papers. Yeah.
say what?
I don't know how to fake papers.
Yes,
That's
I have no idea how to fake papers. That sounds really illegal. And then to send them through the mail, is that another crime? I mean, I'm a goody two shoes. I don't break laws. I don't break rules. Not a lot. Anyway,
you speed in your car.
I do speed in my car. I traffic violations, yes. But I
That's
didn't
my
know
claim.
how to
That's
do
my
that.
claim to fame. Also,
Yeah,
speeding. Yeah,
speeding. I never
speeding.
get tickets though.
I don't either. I've never had a ticket. I
Because
should, but I never have.
I know.
Anyway, I digress. Sorry.
Um, so he managed to make it like a whole year without showing papers. And he just kept his head down while he was there. His first 6 months, he didn't do anything. He stayed in his cell. We went to see him. I went to see him about every other week. I found out that if I could go on Friday morning, see him Friday morning, spend the night, see him again on Saturday, and come home,
Hmm.
I could handle that. Uh, Financially, it was a burden.
Of course.
I had some really good friends that would pitch in, and eventually one of my friends just paid for my hotel room every time. Uh, I took the kids every other time that I went. I took one or two or three kids, depending on who was doing what.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I had to leave them with friends, which I
Hmm.
found ironic because a lot of sex crimes happen with people that we know and trust and love.
Hmm.
Fortunately, to my knowledge, nothing happened to my kids that was bad, but it did put them in a greater risk
Sure.
being harmed.
Hmm.
Um, we we made it work. Um, this whole time, I'm still struggling with my own mental health, and I am horribly depressed. Um, my doctor had to tell me to quit drinking because I was gonna screw up my liver if I didn't quit. So I
Hmm.
quit. Um, I was just I wasn't aware of myself half the time. Um, One of my children developed their own pornography issue while my husband was incarcerated that was out of control.
Hmm.
That hurt our relationship a lot and still affects us today, even though he's 21 years old. He's
Hmm.
very much affected by my behavior, my reactions to his addiction, not being able to get him help. Um, it's there's a lot of stuff that's coming out now, even though my husband's been out of prison for 11 years.
Hmm.
There are still things that affect mostly the older kids, but every once in a while, my daughter will say something about it.
So it really is a lifelong recovery
Yeah.
from addiction and from prison, both.
Right. Yeah. There's lots of financial issues that we still have that I'm not sure if we'll ever recover financially from it. Um, when he got out of prison, he lived at the halfway house in Des Moines, Fort Des Moines, for 3 months. And then once he got there, um, they have a policy where sex offenders are not allowed to have any contact with minors. So I was able to transport him myself from Leavenworth to Des Moines. And we had a friend bring our kids down and met us halfway so that they could have the last car ride home
Mm-hmm.
with their dad. And um, then we didn't know when he was going to have any contact with them after that. Um, once he was able to get out of the fort, some friends of ours, he wasn't allowed to move back home with our kids because, first of all, he had to go through uh, the start the sex offender treatment program for the federal system. And the first steps of that are doing an evaluation and seeing if he truly does have a pedophilic disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because he didn't score in those ranges, he was able to move home after he passed a sexual history polygraph. Um, because I'm such a good advocate for our family, I pressured everyone to get it done as quick as possible, which probably didn't do me any favors because I wasn't ready for him to move home with all of his restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
The restrictions for him, which affected everyone in our family, were actually harder for us than they were for him. And everybody acknowledged that too. His
Can you
probation
talk about
officer.
what those restrictions were?
Yeah. Just the biggest thing was that he was not allowed to ever be alone with our kids. Even though he had not offended against our kids, he was never alone, never to be in the same room with our kids alone. Even if I was in the house, in the kitchen, he couldn't be in the living room with them. If we're watching a movie, I got up to go to the bathroom, he has to go get up and go in the bath or go
With
somewhere
you,
in the
away
bedroom. Uh, he can't sit alone.
with the children. Yeah.
And this is just such a bizarre way to live, and it did not make any sense to me at all. And I had a really hard time with that restriction. Um, if one of the kids had to go to school early, which happened once, uh,
Everybody had to go, or he had to
everybody
go
had
with
to
you?
go, or I had actually lined up a ride for him that morning and he overslept and missed his ride. So then there was pressure on me to get him to the school on time. The other two kids weren't up and ready to go. My husband was sleeping. And so I left them in his room. This is about 5 months into him moving home. And I bucked that system so bad. I I wasn't mentally stable. I had PTSD like crazy from the raid.
Sure.
Um, anytime I had to deal with the cops, including his probation officers, including his treatment provider, I was belligerent. I was not myself. I was not the person that you see here. I was nasty to them. And that didn't help anything.
No, it didn't help you, and it didn't help him. It didn't help anything or
But
anybody.
I could not, I couldn't get over it. I couldn't
Mhm.
figure out how to get over it. So this one
Mhm.
day I left the kids at home for 5 minutes while I ran the other kid 6 blocks down the street so he could get there. And um that night the probation officer stops by, and my 4-year-old daughter then was like dancing around, and she's nervous, and she blurts out at him, "Mommy left us alone with Daddy."
Oh dear.
And my husband was like, "What?" He had no idea
You
this
didn't even
happened.
know.
He didn't even know. And so that just, I knew we were going to get in trouble. And I was so afraid. And it was my fault. I truly felt like it was my fault. And we got pulled into the office at his treatment place. And the ladies said, "Why do you think you're here?" I said, "Well, because I broke the rules." And she said, "No, he broke the rules. He should have known that your son had to be at school on time, and he should have been able up and around and ready to manage this situation." And I was like, "Lady, you don't even know how our family operates." My husband works at night. I'm in charge of the kids during the day. That's not his responsibility. And I had a complete and total mental breakdown that day.
Oh my.
Um, in their office, I took the keys to the car. I left my husband sitting there helpless. I'm like, I'm done. You guys want to play your games and your rules and stuff. He's all yours. You take care of him. And
Oh,
I went to my car, my minivan, and I sat in the car and screamed and cried and thought, I'm going to drive away from here and I'm going to drive into something,
mm,
because that's always my go-to. Because of my other mental health conditions, I experience emotions very intensely.
mm-hmm.
So, and I have suicidal ideation. I always have. But the law doesn't take that into consideration. They don't care. It's not their, it's not what they're about. Um, but I sat there and I did, um, I, I always think,
You're muted. You need to unmute.
that was
Somehow there you go. So, yeah, it's weird. Somehow you got muted. I don't know what happened.
my message said that you muted me.
No, you just went on mute and it came up that on my screen to say, please ask
Oh,
to
weird.
unmute. So yeah,
Okay.
it's computers.
Right. Edit that part out. Um, okay, so I I was sitting in my car. I'm having a total mental health crisis. My husband's left in there with these two women, and they're trying to figure out, they're just waiting for what's going to happen next. And I thought, I'm just going to make a huge scene in their parking lot, and I'm going to pay them back for all the pain that they're.
That they're
This is how
causing.
messed up my thinking is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I called 911 rather than driving into something, and I got mobile crisis there. After two police officers came, the first one was very kind, and the second one was like, "How can you even think about killing yourself? Don't you know that that would do to your kids and all that?" And I'm just like, "No, I'm not. I don't care about that right now. And you need to go back to school." And they drove me to the county hospital after trying to talk me into going to another hospital. And I was like, my insurance isn't going to pay for this anyway, and I can't afford this. But so take me to the cheapest place, because I spent 5 weeks or 5 days in the county hospital, got on some different medication. Honestly, was still feeling suicidal when they let me go, but I had to get back home to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the treatment provider that night that I did all this, she had to go do emergency training with some of our friends so that they could stay with our kids. My husband had to make other arrangements for them.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only one that was approved to be around him and our kids at that time. So, we figured out we needed to have more um, approved monitors for our kids
Mm-hmm.
so that I could have a break, because it just felt like the whole thing was on
World.
my shoulders all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After I had that break, they made him move back out into our friend's house again. Uh, he could only come around when the kids weren't home. We had to have another monitor be around us as a family. So if we wanted to have dinner together, Uncle Dean or Aunt Carolyn came and had dinner with us. And uh, it was just really awkward and unnecessary,
And painful
painful,
for everybody.
brutally painful
Mm-hmm.
for everyone. But
Mm-hmm.
it was the worst on me, and everybody knew that.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get a move back home for several months. During that time, I got some EMDR therapy, which I recommend
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to work through some trauma. It's eye movement desensitization therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was able to get some of my emotions managed to where I wasn't freaking out when the cops came. I was able to build up some tolerance to that when the probation officer came to our house. Um, we also trained. We had the record for how many approved monitors were trained, because you could for $100 you can train as many people as you wanted. So
Ah,
we
so
had
you trained
30
everybody. Yeah.
we had 30 people trained to be his approved monitor, which meant that he had to do a full disclosure on his crime in front of everyone. We had to go through all of his risk factors, all of his protective factors. We had to go through, open our whole lives up to so many people so that they could be informed to know if he would ever do anything to anyone, which they would have a clue. And he never
Wow.
was going to do that anyway. So,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know that. Um, the powers that be don't know that.
Right.
You know, all this time I'm still dealing with all the stigma from everything in my little hometown.
Yes.
Um, People starting rumors. I
Sure.
I felt like I wanted to manage the story, so I was the one that went to the school and talked to the principals at my kids' school, because I wanted them to know the truth and not some fictitious
Mm-hmm.
thing that was going around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wanted my kids to have support if
Mm-hmm.
anybody were to find out that, any kids find out that their dad was on the registry or was incarcerated. I wanted them to have a backup and feel safe where they were at. And I feel like that was the right way to do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be for other people, and that's fine. Um, I was able to find support online. I mentioned earlier, I found a lady that had gone through what I'd been through, and we still keep in touch every once in a while. And her husband's doing great too. Um, and my husband's doing great too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He has never reoffended. He cannot stand pornography now. It just is not a part of our lives at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I found support online. That's what I was going to say.
Yes.
I found this lady who was writing a blog, and I was reading her blog and thinking, wow, she thinks exactly like I do. And I thought she probably lives in New York or California or something. Well, she only lived a couple hours away. And that was probably the first time I'd ever met somebody from the internet in person. We met
Mm-hmm.
we met in Walnut, Iowa, and spent 5 hours talking nonstop to each other about our experiences and how similar her experience was
Mm-hmm.
with ours. That was very healing for me
Of
and for
course.
her and
Of
for her.
course.
She
Of
and
course.
we are still friends. We text back and forth probably at least once a month or something at least.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we were both in the mindset we wanted to help other people. Even
Mm-hmm.
while we were struggling, we wanted to help other people. So I also found a Facebook group online called the Offender's Wife public page. And through that page, which was started by a lady whose husband was accused of something that he didn't do, and she found out how isolating
That
being,
is.
yeah, how isolating it is to be married to someone who's possibly caused sexual harm or has caused sexual harm. So she started a Facebook community, uh, and that was probably 12 years ago that
Mm-hmm.
I joined that community. There were about 65 of us in there then, and now we have over 450 women involved in that very private group on Facebook that are from all over the United States. And even we've got a couple from Australia, a couple from the UK that we can go to and talk about our struggles and not be judged for staying with our guys, not be judged for leaving. Some people leave,
Mm-hmm.
and those women are welcome there too. We have moms now. We have significant others that are
That's
all,
awesome. So
yeah,
you have found that for your sanity, support and therapy were absolutely necessary.
yes,
And
yes.
and what has that led you to?
Um, when my husband was in treatment, in sex offender treatment, and we were going through all of these trials, um, there came a time where uh, there was one time somebody from the public complained to the sheriff that my husband was going to the kids' soccer games. So he had permission from his PO. There is no law that says he can't go, but he had restrictions. He was to show up on time and leave directly after the game was over. He's not to loiter around.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody still complained about that. So rather than just shy away from the whole thing, um, we went to the soccer board and requested a minute at their meeting to talk. And his therapist volunteered to come out and do education with these people on what you really need to be afraid of. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not this guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the people that are causing harm that haven't been caught yet
Mm-hmm.
and continue to cause harm. Um, and that was awesome. I
It
went
is awesome.
to, she came out and talked to our church because somebody at our church had a problem with my husband cleaning the church when nobody was in the building. That was a big, that was a whole nother traumatic incident because then I didn't feel safe at church either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when we had gone to great lengths to be open and honest and transparent about what we were going through, that somebody else would think that he would do something
Mhm.
nefarious when nobody's in the building. Um, and I had spent all these years learning about why my husband did this and what is the deal with internet pornography and how to manage all these things. His therapist called us in after the meeting with our church, and she said, "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I see how well you advocate for your family, Nancy. I think you need to go to school to become a social worker so that you can advocate for people on the registry."
Mhm.
And at the time, I didn't know what I was doing with my life. My daughter was going to kindergarten. I assumed I'd be a lunch lady or something and just make some extra money. Uh, but this sounded intriguing and overwhelming. And I was 45 years old. I'd never been to college. Um, but both of us, my husband agreed, thought it would be a great idea. So in 2015, I started at the local community college. I got my associate's degree. Then I went to a private college and got my bachelor's degree in social work.
Mhm.
While I was in my bachelor's degree, my husband was granted early release from his supervised release from the feds.
Mhm.
And that was a joyous occasion
Yes.
because we had been managing, how do I leave home? I've got 3 kids. I'm trying to go to school, and he still couldn't be alone with our kids
Mhm.
for 4.5 years. Um, and I still remember that day getting that text and being in my advisor's office and just
Yeah.
breaking down crying because it was such a relief that
Relief.
the judge granted him that because he'd followed all the rules. And once everything, that first year was just really hard. Uh,
Mhm.
then I got my master's degree at the University of Iowa in Des Moines. I I chose the clinical route so that I could um, do mental health therapy. My
Mhm.
my goal was, I can see anyone. I specialize in people with emotional intensity disorders,
Mhm.
and I'm reaching people that are on the registry because I want to help them succeed and manage through this lonely path and those feelings of I can't do anything now, my life is over, um, and just trying to help them change their mindset and focus more on the things that they can do. They
Yes.
can be successful, they can have a social life, they can be
Mhm.
trusted, um, they can be safe in the community, and helping them just to stay mentally healthy so that they don't reoffend, they don't wind up homeless. Um, so yeah, I finished up my supervision in December and got my full license. So I'm a LISW. Uh,
Congratulations.
thank you. Um, I work for a very nice man who contracts with me, and he shares my passion, which is really cool.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm starting my own practice now.
That's
So
awesome.
I'll have my own shingle, and I'll get to keep all the money I rake in,
Yes.
which is, which is not a lot. I am
But
not in
still, yeah.
I'm not in this to get rich. I just want to help people and make a living.
Mhm.
Um, I've also been a part of starting an advocacy group uh, for people on the registry.
Mhm.
So trying to get people organized to be able to advocate for themselves,
Mhm.
to be able to talk to lawmakers when there's something on the table that doesn't make any sense to put more restrictions on people on the registry, because there is such a low recidivism rate, and things are hard enough as it is when you're on the registry. Um, just helping to make laws that make sense.
Hmm. Well, good for you. Do you have, are you going to just, are you going to name your private practice or is it just,
I have, oh yes, I have a name for my private practice.
do you want to share that or?
Yes, I will share it. It's
Okay.
called MYOB Therapy. You can find it at myobtherapy.com. I'm I'm just launching it now, just getting all my ducks in a row. I've got to get credentialed with insurances,
Hmm.
but I want to offer uh, individual sessions, and also support groups and
Hmm.
other groups for people on the registry. Haven't quite got all that nailed down yet. Um, I've got some other colleagues that are interested in running the groups. Um, I want to offer family therapy. I'm available for just to, I have a client right now that I'm just kind of holding her hand while her son goes through this.
Yeah.
Um, she doesn't have anybody who is stable enough in her life to walk through this with.
Walk through.
So I went to court with her.
Hmm.
I'm willing to see her son and help him manage his emotions through this whole thing. Um, it's a very scary process, and especially for a young man.
Yes.
Um, so let's see, advocacy. I'm available to go talk to school districts.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, registered people have children, and
Right.
those children have school functions.
Hmm.
Well, the Iowa law allows for registrants to go to their child's school as long as there's written permission from the school district.
Hmm.
When my kids were in school and my husband was on the registry, every football season, when the kids were in junior high, the boys were in junior high, I would sit down with the schedule and I'd write up a letter introducing our family to the other school districts
Hmm.
where my kids were supposed to play. And I would say, my husband's on the registry. He would like to attend our son's football game. This is what we do at our school district because they allowed us, they allowed my husband
Hmm.
to go to school events. You know, he doesn't use the bathroom while he's there. He stays right with me. Uh, we come late and leave early if we need to. And most of the school districts were okay with it. There was one that said absolutely not. And they even hired a county sheriff to come to that game and make sure that my
Sure you
husband
went
didn't
there.
sneak in, which I thought that's priceless.
Hmm.
Even that was very stigmatizing.
Of
And
course.
like I knew what the guy was doing there.
Yeah.
Um, so if anybody needs that service, I am willing to help you find the form. There's a form online that you can use to make that request to the school. Um, yeah, I'm excited to start this
It's,
new chapter.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And if you would send me your contact information, I can put it in the chat or not in the chat, in the comments
Yes,
so that people could, if they need to get in touch with you, they can get in touch with you that way. So,
yeah, absolutely.
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You've come, I mean, you've come through the storm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a lot to be proud of.
And my husband
Mhm.
did 8 years. And I even say our family did 8 years on Iowa sex offender registry. Um, and he was able to apply for a modification and get off early. That option is still available to a few people with a 10-year assignment in Iowa, but 2 years ago, the legislature took that off the table for 10 years. For
Mhm.
10 years. If you're assigned to lifetime registration now, unless you're grandfathered in, if your charges are more than 2 years old, you can still do that. Less than 2 years old, you have to wait 15 years to apply for a modification to get off the registry.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't even know that exists. And they didn't know it existed. And when they saw it in the news 2 years ago, oh, there's a way off the registry.
There's a way out, yeah.
There'd been a way off the registry. They just made it harder for you to do. They
And
don't
hard to
advocate.
find out about, just hard to learn about.
Yes.
Yeah, and so your advocacy, your digging and scratching at everything and learning and educating yourself will certainly benefit a lot of other families, a lot of other families.
Yeah.
And isn't that what it's all about? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine going through this alone.
right, right,
It's very, very lonely.
right. I just got a new sign that says, "When life hands me lemons, I send them back and get chocolate because I deserve it."
Damn it.
I kind of like that because I like chocolate. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
I
So,
also like margaritas. So
so you're good with whatever life sends you. You can deal with it. Well, congratulations and thank you so much for being willing to share your story.
you're welcome. Thanks for having
Yes,
me on. I'll
yes.
come back anytime anybody wants to hear something else I'm doing.
Okay. Yes, and I will be in touch for that
Okay.
very reason. So, okay. Well, I'm going to close for tonight then.
Okay. Sounds
Um,
good.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Once again, I'm Sue Hutchins, and this is Iowa Prison Perspectives. And I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at Iowa Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. And that's IA Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. Please comment. Please let me know, let us know how you feel, what you think, if you agree, if you disagree, whatever, because this really is for you, the public. And if you think it's valuable and would like to support this, then just click the like button and you can also follow if you want to. I appreciate your listening and I hope to hear from you soon. So thank you so very much and take care, and I'll be back.